If you're a founder of a startup thinking about raising investment, there are a number of things it's a good idea to think about at that stage. So the first is, how much money do you need and what are you going to spend it on? Probably the second thing is, who are you going to raise that money from? Have you sort of used your network? Are there family and friends? Have you got a particular contact? Are you going to be raising it from angels, or are you raising it from a VC, sort of a small VC at that startup stage? Valuation. Absolutely key. That's the value at which your investors are going to be investing, and it also determines how much equity you're going to be giving away as the founding team. And the reason that's really important is that you're probably going to be doing another 3 to 5 rounds of investment until your big exit or until your sort of Series A. So you want to make sure you've thought about that when you're thinking about how much equity you're going to be giving away. Your pitch deck, putting your pitch deck together. Obviously, your pitch deck is what you're going to be taking to your investors, but putting that together really cements your idea. So I think that's a very, very helpful exercise to do early on. Business plan, make sure you have one. Ideally, sort of maybe 12 to 18 months, looking sort of forward looking. SEIS and EIS tax breaks. Very important, because UK investors, individual investors, angel investors are going to be very keen that those tax breaks are available to them, so make sure you know whether the company is eligible for them or not. I suppose the other thing that's very important is practice makes perfect. So if you've put your pitch together, you've done your research, make sure you actually practice your pitch and take feedback from people, because that's going to be key. You're putting your pitch deck together. There are a number of things you probably want to think about including within that pitch deck. So the first thing I would say is, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? So, what's the issue out there that your company is addressing? Why you? Why you and your team? So, what's different about you? What's different about your previous experience, or about your sort of expertise that makes you and your team the right people to do this? Why is now the right time to bring this to market? So that's obviously quite key. The other thing is competitors. You will have them, most likely, and don't shy away from that fact. You're pitching to investors. Your investors are sophisticated people who will have seen other businesses. They'll be aware of probably who your competitors are. Make sure you mention who your competitors are and why you think you are different. Are you revenue earning, or have you had some great scientific, research, sort of evidence? Have you had some great press coverage? Do you have some brilliant people on your board or your advisory board? Sort of what's the traction that you already have? And the other thing that's really important is your exit strategy. What in your view right now is the way that you're going to exit and your investors are going to exit this company? Is it, are you going to sell it to a competitor? Is it going to be a trade sale? Is there anyone at the moment who seems to sort of be interested or might be the right partner to eventually effectively buy you out? When you're looking to raise investment, there are a number of things you probably want to think about before you actually get to that sort of investment stage, and I call it the pre-investment cleanup. So the first thing I would do is I'd put together a cap table. And a cap table is effectively a list of all of your shareholders with, and how many shares they each own. And that effectively shows you who has control of the company at shareholder level. The reason that's important is because your investors will expect to see that, and also that cap table will then adjust once your investors have been issued with equity. So it's quite an important document. The other thing putting a cap table together sort of brings to front of your mind is if you have promised equity to anyone else and you haven't actually issued it yet. So maybe maybe a friend of the family has put some money into the company, but you've never actually issued them any equity, and it was never intended as a loan. Or maybe you've promised some of your key employees options, but you've never put an option scheme in place. So it brings those things to the front of mind, and it gives you a chance to sort of resolve them then and there. The other thing that's really important is IP. Say you've had your idea, you've started writing some code or doing some designs before you've actually incorporated the company. Under English law, what that means is that that sort of work is probably yours. It's probably vested in you personally. And what you have to make sure is that that is then transferred across to the company, so that the value is effectively in the company, which is what the investors are going to be investing in. So another thing to think about is your company house filings. Are they up to date? They're easily neglected, so this is the time to sort of make sure they're all up to date. Company books, do you have them? If you don't, make sure you've put them together. They will be needed at investment stage, so just make sure you've done that. The other thing is data room. So effectively all that means is that you've assembled all of the documents that your investors are likely to want to see, to just make sure that what you're saying about your company is true and that there is value there. And you've assembled all of those documents and put them into one place, so they can easily access. And that might be, you know, employment contracts and your articles of association and all of that sort of thing, key contracts with clients and that sort of thing. The other thing is putting together a term sheet. You know, there are key things legally and commercially that you want to be included in your investment documents, and so putting a term sheet together sooner rather than later, and that to be controlled by the founders, the company, if you like, when you're at an early stage, that's much better if it's controlled by you. So if you have a think about what the key terms of your investment documents are going to be, and there's a term sheet put together at early stage, then that is very helpful, and that can be in turn circulated to any investors who are interested after you've pitched to them. One of my clients very recently found themselves in a situation whereby they had used a developer, a third-party developer, to help them put together a platform and also an app. And those were that's effectively was their business. And what had happened is that they had not had an agreement with the developer in place, and actually they'd had a number of developers because they'd switched halfway through because they weren't 100% confident with the first one. What that meant is when they were thinking about raising investment is that actually they couldn't confirm that the company owned the IP in the platform and the app, which was effectively the company. So they had to go back and speak to the developers that they had used to ask them to sign an assignment of IP over into the company. The problem with doing that, of course, is that first of all, you've got to track down these people. Secondly, you've got to have a slightly difficult conversation at times. And thirdly, often they want to be paid to sign that document. So it's much better to deal with that, use preventative measures. So actually put an agreement in place with your developers if you're using any kind of external consultants or third parties. But if you haven't done that, make sure you've cleaned it up before you actually then go externally to raise money. So make sure they've signed that assignment of IP and you can prove that the company owns the IP in your product before you go out to market to raise. The other thing I've seen very recently with a client is that when they've come to me to draft some investment documents, they've already got people interested, they've agreed terms vaguely, and we're sort of ready to go. We realise that actually they've signed a subscription agreement in the past, which contains provisions around issuing preferential shares, effectively, which causes a problem for the current investment round, because effectively what that document says is that in your next round you will issue this previous investor with shares that have better rights than the shares that you were planning to issue to your current investors. And then, of course, when that comes to light, your current investors want the same type of share, which is not necessarily helpful to you as founders. Because if you have shares with lesser rights than your investors, then you're not always aligned. It can be demotivating, but it also has a financial impact on what you're going to receive in the event of an exit. What I've also seen recently is someone sign what is called a convertible loan note. So a convertible loan note is effectively just a loan agreement, but what that says is that if the loan is not repaid within a certain period of time, then that loan can convert into equity. And what that means, of course, is that when an investor is looking at the company and it's looking at the cap table and it sees who owns, the company, that cap table will completely change once that loan has converted into equity, and that might totally change, who has control of the company and the whole look and feel of it. So, first of all, you have to be transparent about these things. So you need to know that they're there as a founder. But secondly, sometimes you can actually do something about those convertible loan notes. It might be possible to go back to your lender and to renegotiate terms so that that loan note isn't unattractive to the company, because it's also in their interests, of course, that the company raises money and goes on to be successful. So that is often possible to do that at this stage. But again, you have to know that it's there, and you have to sort of make sure that it's out in the open, and that you're dealing with it. And an investment raise, preparing for an investment raise, is a really good time to think about what's in place, and then to go and fix things which maybe you have been avoiding until that point.